Hello, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Discuss with Russ. I'm Russell Rivera, founder and president of Voice Wealth Management. This is episode 26, and my episode, I'm going to just restart.
That's fine.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the, wait a minute, I'm going to actually smile this time. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Discuss with Russ. I'm Russell Rivera, founder and president of Voice Wealth Management. This is episode 26, and my guest today is Tara Faquir of Trustate. Our topic today is smoothing estate administration. For those of you tuning in today for the first time, the Discuss with Russ series has focused on helping you get through the crisis and start thinking about all the other aspects of life that can have large effects on your financial situation. We want to help you take advantage of opportunities, manage risks, and avoid pitfalls so you are most likely to succeed. For those of you receiving our newsletter, you might hear me say it's time to start playing offense. Voice Wealth Management, my firm, primarily works with entrepreneurs, young professionals, and their families to help them get the most out of their money. While I'm a chartered financial analyst and certified financial planner, many also see me as their personal CFO and financial therapist, recognizing the psychological power of money in addition to using short-term and long-term planning to help you get the most out of every dollar you earn and use. Well, now let's turn to our guest, Tara Faquir. Tara is co-founder and COO of Trustate. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Economics from the University of Miami and MBA from Fox School of Business at Temple University. She and her business partner started Trustate after she had to do 2 estate administrations within a 12-month period. She's a Massachusetts native, New England Patriots superfan, and recently relocated to Georgia. So with that, Tara, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us, I guess, towards the tail end of your relocation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and chatting with you.
Great, thank you. So 2 estate administrations in a year. Tell us a bit about that experience.
So it was not a good one, as you can imagine. As you know, with most estate administrations, for most people, it really comes as a surprise and something that you're not planning for. I mean, of course, I know we're going to talk about planning and prep and all that, but when you're tasked with an estate administration, it really is this big job that you didn't carve out time for, and you have to complete it, right? It's not something that you can just leave outstanding. So the experience that my family had with having to administer 2 over the course of a year was a lot, and there was stresses and confusion, and you don't know what you're supposed to do. I always say that you don't know what you don't know.
Well, let's take a step back. What
Mhm.
is an estate administration, right? Because we're talking about it, but I'm not sure everybody understands what that actually means.
Absolutely. Great question. So as an estate administration is essentially when someone passes away, there are all the things that need to be closed out in that person's life. So typically people think about an estate administration as the will and trust and some, the finances, but it's really so much more than that. Think about all the things as you, as a person, own and pay for and, have linked to your name. Well, when somebody passes away, all of that has to either be closed, canceled, or rolled over to somebody new. So an estate administration is all the things that have to be done to close out that person's estate. And the way that we kind of think about it is, there's estate planning, and everybody knows what a will is for the most part. And the will outlines all the buckets that all the things will go into. The estate administration is getting that water to those buckets. It's a big process.
Okay, so now let's continue the story of how it was for you and kind of how that process actually works, right? We've talked to people on this show who are kind of lawyers who help prepare the documents necessary, but then it's obviously about, well, doing the work. So
Right.
explain a little bit more about what that meant for you, how doing 2 in a year helped, harmed your family, or I don't want to say harmed, but
Yeah, no, sure. It's a stressor. Absolutely. So, there's a couple of different ways that people typically go out about an estate administration. They can do it on their own, which is a tremendous amount of time. And I think that you and I had a conversation recently. It takes about 570 hours to administer an estate on, DIY. And you had mentioned a really great stat. Well, that's about 4 months of a full-time job. That's a lot of work. So just think about that. That's the amount of work that goes into an estate administration. So you can do it yourself, or a lot of people end up hiring a lawyer. The misconception there is that, you're using a lawyer because that's what you know to do, but the work that needs to be done isn't actually legal work. So you end up using a lawyer because they offer the guidance that you need, but you're essentially paying for a service that should be provided at a different rate level. So that's kind of, the two ways that you could administer a estate. For my family and I, we really did a hybrid model, if you will. So there was things that we did on our own, but then we did have an attorney as well. And even with that, we were offered guidance for sure, but there's still so many things that you have to do on your own, so such things as, getting the security system, we didn't have the code to that, and getting that correctly turned off or, recoded for the time being. And actually a really interesting story that happened during one of the administrations is I had my grandmother's car and I thought, oh, I'll bring it to my home for safekeeping. Well, there was a storm that came through and a tree fell on it. And then you're like, okay, well, now I have a car that's not in my name, car insurance that's not in my name either. What do you do? And these are the things that you don't think about and you don't want to have to think about. But when they happen, you're really confused and don't even know where to turn to. So, that is just kind of a small piece of the entire administration, but all that to say that things pop up that you're not prepared for, and it can be just very stressful because you're also dealing with the loss of a loved one.
Now going back, obviously thinking about the legal element, right? Wouldn't it be natural to go to an attorney? I mean, it is a legal process in terms of it. A lot of things have to be, the courts are involved, right? The courts have to be signed off. So wouldn't it make sense to have an attorney involved in order to represent, make sure you're doing everything right, and make sure somebody doesn't come after you?
Sure. So, that's kind of where the conversation really starts of, where do you turn for an estate administration? So when people think about an estate administration and the legal aspects, they're really talking about probate, because that is something where you have to go through a court. When you think about court, you hear the word probate, you think scary, legal, I can't do this on my own. Well, you can do it on your own. And really what probate is, it's really the gates that open up the estate administration. And in many states, you can represent yourself. So you don't actually need to retain a lawyer for probate. Now, in some states you do. So, that's where you need to kind of do the work there. Like Florida, for instance, is a state where you do need to have legal representation for probate. But in most states, New Jersey, New York, you can do it on your own. So there are going to be aspects of the estate administration that may require a lawyer. And in that case, you should retain a lawyer for that piece, but the entire estate administration, let's say 96% of it, is entirely administrative, and that's where you don't need to have a lawyer, and you can save some real dollars in the time.
Fair enough. So you were mentioning specifically about certain elements. So let's go back to that conversation with the car, with your grandmother's car, I guess, and the tree that fell on it. So let's get specific there, right? So you didn't know what to do, and you ended up with this situation where you needed to solve, how do you get that piece of property covered? So obviously we could spend 570 hours going over the entire state you administered. But let's talk about this one piece. So what was the resolution of that? What did you find out? And what did you
know? So I was it ended up turning out to be fine. So because of the time frame, the insurance was covered for the remainder of the months on that particular term. So it was already prepaid. So that was a win. I did have to explain the situation time and time again to the insurance rep, as well as when I took the car in for service, because none of it was in my name. I did have documentation that showed, a death certificate and what that really showed, okay, well, I am who I say I am. This is actually what happened, but I can't have a car, totaled in my front yard. That doesn't work for anyone either. And we were able to work through the process. And it was really just making multiple calls and figuring out what we had to do. And I really felt, blessed in that situation because everyone I talked to was actually really understanding. But it was still a lot of time because you're calling all these different people and hoping that, they understand your situation. We did get the car fixed, everything was fine. And then once, everything transitioned appropriately throughout the estate administration, we then went ahead and sold it. But at the time, we wanted to get it fixed because we wanted to make sure that we could sell it in very good condition.
Yeah, and I think you touch upon what some of the issues are, right? In the sense
Mhm.
that it's 570 hours, but it's not like which like you said, it's 4 months of full-time work, but it might not be sitting there like grinding away doing creative stuff, right? Like I think about things that I'm trying to do with financial wellness for people, right? And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there, and one of the things I tell companies that I'm talking to, it's like, well, do you want your employees having had this taken care of already? Or do you want them sitting on hold for 2 hours arguing about bills with the cable company or the credit card company
Right.
or whatever? Or would you have them, want them educated in a way that they aren't even thinking about needing to do that? And then
Mhm.
amount of time I sit on hold trying to take care of something that takes 5 minutes in real life. Um,
Right.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of the time goes, right?
And and I think you make a great point because it's not planned time, right? So you're not going to say, well, today I'm going to work on this for 4 hours. I mean, it's great in theory, but that's typically not how it goes because you say, oh, I need to call and cancel this account, and you're calling Fidelity and you're on hold, and then you're getting to the next representative and you're on hold again, and then 30 minutes on hold turns into an hour and a half, and then 2 hours is up and you're like, I actually didn't get anything accomplished, but now I need to go pick up your kids because that's important. So that's kind of where the time adds up is you really don't have this this streamlined process, as an individual who, because most people fortunately don't have to deal with this time and time again in their life. So, when you're doing this over and over again, you're finding some efficiencies. When you're not, you're just kind of going and doing what you think is right. So, to your point, it's not, I'm going to work on this for 10 hours today. It's little bits and pieces everywhere, but you're trying to carve that out of your already busy life. So most people who are named as an executor, they are, one of the most responsible people in that family, and they typically hold a full-time job and they have other things going on in their life. So it's really trying to find that 4 months of a full-time job and put it on top of their already busy life. And that's where it really becomes a true burden.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I know in our prior conversations, we talked about someone I know who, is going through this now, right? They lost the matriarch of the family, now trying to get through it themselves, and they're proving it they quite done, right? They have paperwork they can't find, which means people who are entitled to money, they can't, aren't getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they had a will, obviously if they had a trust instead of a will, that might have made things somewhat easier, but
Mm-hmm.
regardless, um, and so advisors like myself are trying to help clients get prepared before these situations happen. So, people, we know people get busy, right? They hem, they haw, they delay, but obviously there was some, I actually spoke to someone emailed me last night. I was mentioning the newsletter that had gone out, and the video that went out, and in it, I talked about how some people probably use this time to get their wills or estates sort of taken care of over the last year because, right, like they
Yeah.
had time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but a lot of times there are more pressing issues, and it's just like, yeah, I know I need to get that done,
Right.
right? Um,
I'll get to it when I get to
exactly. I'll get to
it.
it when I get to it, and then it's like,
Problem.
right. But it's my job. It's my job in my role to make sure people are thinking about it, to stay on them, hold them accountable, because again, we never know when something might happen.
Yes.
So, right, and we talked about people who have passed and what you have to do in the post. What can people do in the in advance to get themselves prepared so that whoever has to deal with stuff can make it
Hmm.
easier on them?
Absolutely. So, we at Trustate obviously help people with we help people on the estate administration, but the prep side as well. And the prep side is a really important part of it, to your point, because it's something that you just have to do. So, we have some products that really assess somebody's entire estate. And that's my recommendation is, do the tough thing, right? So have that hard conversation and really understand the entirety of it, whether it's your estate or if you're the future executor of a parent's estate or aunt or uncle or whoever that is. You have to ask the questions, because as uncomfortable as it may feel to say, hey, I'm interested in learning about X, Y, and Z, in the event that something were to happen, you're going to be happy you did, because if something does happen and now you're tasked with an estate administration and you truly don't know where to begin, you don't know the location of their safety deposit box, and you don't know, what institution they banked at, it makes it just that much harder. So, have an assessment of your estate done and really look at all the things outside of the will and trust, because things are in the will, like that's a good roadmap. But for everything else that you're going to have to administer, it's better to ask now rather than like I said, wait. And if it's for yourself and you want to get, your ducks in a row, if you will, I would suggest, doing an assessment, whether that's with Trustate or with your advisor or whoever that may be, or just, if you feel like you can do a self-assessment and then communicating that to the right person. So, a plan is only as good as its execution in any state. And if you do an assessment of your estate, but you don't tell the right individual, then that was essentially a waste of time.
Right.
Because people need to know about it. So think about the people who you want to be involved in your estate prep and estate plan, whether that's an executor or maybe it's all your children or whoever it is. Somebody else needs to know besides you, because it's one of those things that shouldn't be kept a secret.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, good advisors, and people can make their determinations as to whether or not they think but are for the most part well aware of the issues regarding wills, trusts, powers of attorneys, and like that deal with physical and monetary assets, right?
Sure.
But so much of our lives is now online,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And so you have to deal with digital assets,
Yeah.
email, social media accounts, other things that I can't even think about or have yet to be created.
Right.
And at the same time, right, like even as an advisor, I kind of have tools where people can store digital documents, and I have a responsibility if I do that, obviously, to keep with security and secure. But like one of the things that I think has been a big focus lately, not only with my business but also within the regular world, is obviously digital fraud, right? In
Mm-hmm.
the sense that you create an online vault somewhere, does somebody get in, and communicating that. And then obviously you may be dealing with older people who don't have access or knowledge of all these online tools to create a Dropbox, for example, or to
Right.
create a vault with their advisor, a digital vault with their advisor, which I know I give people access to do so that
Mm-hmm.
multiple people can access their documents when something happens, because something will
Right.
at some point.
Yeah.
So how are you dealing with that, right? Or how are you advising people to deal with that, and how are you dealing with the fraud question is really where
Sure.
I'm coming from.
So, plugging Trustate for a moment, we have essentially a vault. It's a more sophisticated vault than just a place to hold your documents, but we, allow sharing opportunities. And that's important because, as I mentioned before, you do want people to know all the things that they're supposed to know when an estate administration comes up. But with that being said, the security of it is essential because you are housing private information. And one of the things that, like to kind of say as well is when you're thinking about the security, and there's a couple different things I'll mention, but one of the cybersecurity firms I spoke with had a really good way to think about it. So, we build our platform on, and we build it to the highest standards of cybersecurity we can. But it's very similar to like when your dog gets out of the house, it's because you left the door open. So you can have all the greatest locks in the world, but if you don't close the door and lock it, anybody can get in or out. So, from a personal standpoint, I would say, if you're an end user of any of these vaults out there, make sure you're actually taking the right steps when you're logging in and out to actually sign off. Because a lot of times you X out of it and you think you've signed off, you close your computer, walk away. Well, you just left that door open. So, that's one point of it. The other thing is, there's a lot of things that you can do to house your documents in a way that actually don't hold your account numbers or your social. So you might want your executor to know where you bank, and that's an important point of information, but they don't necessarily need to know the account number at this time. So think about what you're uploading and downloading, and what you really are, housing on these digital platforms. So, basically a long way to say, be thoughtful about what you're putting out there, but also be thoughtful about when you're signing in and out, and making sure that you're fully signing out of all those platforms. And then as far as social media, that's another thing. You do want people to be able to close out your accounts on your behalf or memorialize your accounts. There's some things you can do today. So for instance, with Facebook, you can actually create your legacy contact today. So if, God forbid, something were to happen, that legacy contact has the right to go ahead and cancel or memorialize your account. So there are things that you can do today to be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when Facebook was created with the intention of serving college students, they didn't think about this. I went out, like, it probably was 7 or 8 years in that Zuck had to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait a minute, people pass away, and we
Yeah.
have to know what they do.
And it's quite a heart-wrenching thing, from the clients we've worked with. They have mentioned that if they had, one of their the person who passed was active on social media, and that account was not canceled or memorialized, and then a year goes by and it pops up as someone you may know or a memory, and that really kind of stops somebody in their tracks, and it really can be, just like I said, heart-wrenching if those steps aren't taken to properly close out those accounts as well.
Sure. And but we also know that grieving is really a never-ending process.
Right.
Things can always come up.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about kind of attorneys and, so and the fees they might charge for doing things that are kind of below their pay grade. Let's put it that way. Seems like the way it was, you sort of described it. So how much money do people use or throw away using their attorneys to handle issues that they could be doing themselves?
Yeah.
We talked about time, right? But like, how much time are they, we talked about 507 hours or 4 months of a full-time job, but right, like what let's talk about the money first, and then talk about really, what could we give back to people who are trying to go through this, and
Absolutely.
they're trying to grieve and figure out how to press forward.
So, that's a great question. And fees, attorneys' fees are based on their rate. So there's no, absolute, this is how much. Right. So, there are statistics out there that show that in most cases, for estates under $10 million, the average person spends over $43,000. And that's a lot of money, especially for things that maybe you could save a little bit on. And the other thing I think about too is someone worked really hard over the course of their lifetime to build that wealth. And I don't think the intention was to support fees for their estate. It was really intended for those beneficiaries. So I think that, that's something to think about. There are, other solutions out there. You can do it yourself. You can use Trustate. We offer a flat fee based on the size of the estate. And then that way, when you do need an attorney, you're retaining them for just the legal portion and really cutting down your costs, which is really important. And as I mentioned, I think that those monies that were in the account are intended for the beneficiary and not, to be completely depleted throughout the estate administration.
So yeah, so we talked about, I guess, some of the things that people can do,
Mm-hmm.
In terms of prepping themselves and digital fraud. So what are the other things? We talked about financial, we talked about physical, we talked about, I guess, digital. What other assets might people not be thinking about when they're doing their estate planning, that end up becoming thorns,
Mm-hmm.
thorns as the administration process goes through?
Yeah, I think one of the most common assets that that people don't, or that are often overlooked, is really in the specialty property, and it's, trademarks, copyrights, royalties, patents. That's really important, and a lot of time people overlook that and do not put that into any documentation, but that's something that can actually be rolled over, and in most cases, and I should double check this before I say it, but with a copyright, for instance, that goes on for 75 years after someone passes. So that is something that needs to be managed. So that might even extend the life of your executor. So those are things that people just don't think about and really should have a plan for. The other things that
well, I mean, we see, for example, Dr. Seuss's copyrights being managed, right? Like with the recent controversy about books being taken out of publication.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's certainly being managed by his estate. Michael Jackson, his estate,
right?
Like we see it often with big time, well-known creatives, but maybe we're not. Maybe there are other people and other entrepreneurs who might be able to.
Right, but I mean, think about so you're thinking about it from Michael Jackson, and they said Dr. Seuss, huge, right? That makes sense. That's massive, but there's a lot of people who own copyrights to things. They own trademarks. They own a business, and that business has a trademark. Well, if that business is going to continue, that's something that needs continuous management. So it's really thinking about the things that maybe don't fit into that perfect little bucket of real property. Obviously cars, homes, everyone gets that, but it's all those other little things. The other thing that we talk to a lot of people about that is an unknown, and it's not necessarily something that needs to be in a will by any means, but firearms. So those are hard to get rid of if you are not a registered gun carrier. And if you are and you pass away and you have beneficiaries that need to do something with those firearms, it makes it very difficult for them to actually do so. Especially think about it from a collectible standpoint. There's some firearms out there that are collectibles that are worth, boatloads of money, and you want somebody to be able to actually sell them or whatnot, that whatever your wishes are. So making sure that you're planning appropriately for that. So who is going to be the beneficiary of those guns if you were to pass? And those are things that people just don't think about.
That's that's a really great point, because that brought up something for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you've dealt with before? Only in the sense that, sometimes you're dealing with that across state lines. So,
mm-hmm. Which is a biggie.
But yeah, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I've got something to talk about with somebody. So that's very
yeah. So and I think that's you don't think about it today, right? It's something you own. Well, that's no big deal, but if God forbid something were to happen and someone else has to deal with that, it can be a true, for lack of better words, nightmare for them to try to get rid of them, especially if they have to cross state lines. So it's something to put some thought into today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just did put it in my
Good.
I won't go into more detail, but that is absolutely interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. And any last thoughts of things we didn't cover, or and then of course, how can people contact you?
No, I think we covered a lot. The only other thing I would recommend for people to think about, and this is kind of, have to, and is your pets. So make sure you have a care plan for your pets, and especially if they have any sort of, specialty care, make sure that is documented somewhere as well, because that's something that you want to make sure that they're getting taken care of. And if there's somebody who is willing to take your pets for you or whatnot, that's something that should be written somewhere.
And of course, you can leave your entire estate to your pet, like we've seen.
You can. You can.
Very good. But I can understand pets are important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, continue.
No, but as far as getting in touch with us, we are online. You can find us at www.trustate.com, and that's TRUSTATE. You can email me directly at tara@trustate.com, and we are always here to talk through an estate prep and estate administration. And we do an initial consultation for free to understand what services you need. And if you find yourself in an estate administration and feeling overwhelmed, it's never too late to come to us. We can really help at any point in the process.
So thank you, Tara. And
Thank you.
just in general, I want to thank Tara Faquir for joining us today on Discuss with Russ. For those of you who enjoyed the program and would like to reach out to me and talk about any of this issue or any other financial issues you may have, you can reach me at Russell, that's RUSSELL .Rivera at voicewealth.com. Russell, RUSSELL.RIVERA at voicewealth.com, or just call me at 646-630-0980. So again, we'll be having another Discuss with Russ next month. We don't have a program quite yet, but we will, of course, watch out for our new episode hitting in July. And of course, you can get view all of our videos at www.voicewealth.com/blog or on the Voice Wealth Management YouTube channel, which I hope you are watching this on right now. Anyway, thank you again for joining us. And remember, it's your money and your future, and we can be your partner and your voice. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.